pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello BookTube, I'm Sean the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel. Here I am with another Totally Blind page 112 tag, and this one is a collaboration with Juliet Ann. I am new to her channel, and I haven't watched a whole lot of her videos, but every video that I've watched on her channel has been deeply impressive. She likes a lot of the same kind of books that I do. She speaks really articulately about what she does and doesn't like, and she also has a lot of creativity in the way that she makes videos of while she's refinishing things in her house and stuff. It's really interesting. So please check her out. She needs exponentially more subscribers than she currently has. So please check out Juliet Ann's channel. Now let me talk about the Totally Blind page 112 tag. So this is based on the literary prize from France, where the jurors evaluate a book based on page 112 only, without any identifying information about the author or the title or anything. And that's how they generate a shortlist. And the theory is that most books are heavily edited at the very beginning, so the first page, the first paragraph, the first chapter has had a lot of eyeballs on it, and it's been shaped accordingly. But the editor and the author both slack off later in the book. So if you really want to judge the quality of a book, open to page 112. It's totally random. It could be a page 111 or 122. It doesn't matter, right? But later in the book, read that page and see how interested you are and how deeply you respond or do not respond to the writing to see what the true quality of the book is. So, very interesting. So I adapted this literary prize to a tag, and at first I was doing books that I would just pull off my own shelf and read to you and not reveal until the end. And then one of my subscribers suggested, well, wait a minute, you still know what they are, so why don't you let me send you some page 112s and not tell you who they are until you open my second email at the end, and that will replicate the prize more closely. So I said, sure. Now that's the Totally Blind version of the tag. So that's what Juliet Ann and I have done here. I also think the completely cited version of this tag, where I know and you know which books I'm going to read from, is equally valid, if not more useful. And so check out the video that I did just a few days ago, which I have called the predictions version of the page 112 tag. But the Totally Blind version is really fun for viewers and for me. So that's what I'm going to do today. There's one thing that I wanted to announce that is a slight tweak to the Totally Blind version of this tag. I used to print these excerpts just before I'd film the video and then read them to you and read them myself for the very first time on camera, and I have abandoned that approach. I think that's ridiculous because the page 112 literary prize people don't make their judgments based on their initial readings, and I was making really stupid preliminary conclusions and was often confused about what I'd read and would need to reread it and rephrase what I'd said and edit all that gobbledygook out. And no, I have read these excerpts 3 or 4 times before I turned the camera on, and I have my opinions preset, and I have checked a bunch of pronunciation, and that's the way this tag will be done from now on, okay? And thanks to Juliet Ann for agreeing to collaborate. So she has sent me excerpts from 3 novels. I don't know what they are, and I have the printouts here. I'm going to read them to you, give you my thoughts, and then rank them according to my interest in reading them at the end. Then I will check the last email Juliet Ann has sent me and find out which books they are. Alright? Without further ado, here is book number 1. They're pathetic, those American detectives, he would say, after Janice Bryan had been enthusing about the latest episode of Kojak, Columbo, Ironside, or McCloud. They take a whole hour-long program to work out something Sherlock Holmes would have solved in 5 minutes. They wouldn't stand a chance against Father Brown, or Lord Peter Wimsey, or even Miss Marple. Had he always been like this, Colette found herself wondering, or was it something recent? A lifetime of actuarial considerations, of warning against risk, of permanently having in the back of one's mind thoughts of flood, subsidence, epidemics, war, revolution, of calculating the life expectancies of young men just setting out in the world of paid employment. Perhaps all these had had a narrowing effect on Reg's mind. Whatever it was, she felt uncomfortable in Reg's presence. He had taken to calling at Fernlight Avenue at odd times, ostensibly to discuss Janice Bryan and what to do about him. But the conversation would always quickly slip away from that subject towards Reg himself. He would tell Colette and Aldous of his loneliness and of his attempts to find a new partner. He'd joined a singles club but was depressed by the people he'd met. He'd been on various dates with a number of widows and spinsters, but they had all ended in disappointment. "She sounds very nice," Colette said, after Reg had described an unusually attractive 60-year-old he'd met. "Will you be getting together then?" "She's not interested in sex," said Reg. "That's the trouble. What is it about women when they get old? They seem to lose their sex drive. It just goes. Or is it that they've never had it, but have just been pretending all their lives? And when they get past childbearing, they no longer feel the need to keep up the pretense. Have you puzzled this one out yet, Aldous? What are they up to, these women?" Aldous endured these visits mostly in polite silence. Reg was often mildly drunk when he called, and Colette slowly gathered that he was almost as much a drinker as Janice Bryan. Often his speech was slightly slurred, and his lower lip shinily wet. After a while he learnt what nights Aldous taught his evening classes, and then called only on those, always leaving before Aldous was home. Okay, this one's so interesting because I bet some of you who know me well would think that this wouldn't be my cup of tea, but I really like this. I mean, I hate Reg, but I love the fact of how deliciously the writer has caused me to hate Reg. What a jerk! I like it. And then what's with the Colette and Aldous? Pretty literary characters' names, don't you think? I like the writing. I often use the verb sing. The writing doesn't sing, but this feels obviously like a very British novel, and it just grabs me. I hate Reg. And who is Janice Bryan? So we got a Colette, an Aldous, and a Janice facing this way, facing that way. Curious about that. And obviously Reg is trying to seduce Colette. Yeah, I really like it. I want to read it. It's really good. Book number 2. Remember that fear causes to happen the very things it fears. That is why fear should be unknown to us. In fact, Parlanchina discovered men before they ever discovered her. Remedios's group passed along a jungle path 5 kilometers away, quite regularly en route for the foothills to the Sierra, and army patrols also occasionally passed by. Parlanchina was fascinated, and she tracked them as silently and efficiently as she would track any other animal. She observed their demeanor, how the guerrilleros were always laughing and joking and making a lot of noise, and how the soldiers always crept along, sweating and suffering beneath the weight of their clinging uniforms and bulging backpacks. She saw how their eyes bulged with nervousness, and how their mouths gaped with fear, like beached fish. She saw how they started every time their feet cracked a twig, and she began to play games with them. From the cover of the trees, with her ocelot crouched beside her, she would suddenly let out a coughing growl like a tiger, screech like a parrot, or whoop like a howler monkey. Giggling with delight, she would relate to both her parents how the soldiers had leapt with fright, had fallen flat on their stomachs, and fired shots wildly into the vegetation. They would shake their heads and admonish her, but she would not stop, because she was always hoping to see Federico. Federico was the secret cause of her daytime reveries, and she followed him whenever he passed, to gaze on his fine, slim body and his handsome face. She found herself imagining what it would be like to stroke his flat belly and his long legs, and when she saw him her heart would leap in her breast, and something would catch at the back of her throat. When she did not see Federico, tormenting the soldiers was a little consolation. But no one ever saw her. The soldiers never knew that they owed some of their torture to her, and Federico never knew that the most lovely and most voluble girl in Cesar was in love with him. One day, Parlencina came home and said to her father with surprise and amusement, "Papacito, the soldiers are hiding dishes on the path. Why do you think they are doing that?" I love this! I love Parlencina! She's my literary Galentine's Day sister. You go, girl! What's going on here? So, obviously in a Latin American or Spanish country, there is some kind of a war on. This is a very whimsical passage, and very sensual or erotic. Everything's bulging, and Parlencino's wanting to caress all the bulges. Oh my goodness. I like the writing, but mostly why I love this is I have already fallen in love with Parlencina. And what a cool relationship she has with her parents. She's giggling with delight, telling her parents how she scared the soldiers. And then what an enigmatic conclusion. It's obviously not a conclusion, but how page 112 ends is she's wondering why they're hiding dishes. I assume it means pottery dishes on the path. So, no, this grabs me utterly. And I have no idea what book it comes from. I can't wait to find out. That's fascinating. Book number 3. Now this one, there is a long sentence fragment that starts at the beginning of page 112. I usually start reading from the first full sentence, but in this case, because it's about 5 lines of a sentence that had started at the bottom of page 111, I am going to read the fragment just to give us some more to go on. So this fragment starts, "Band-Aids or the pencil sharpener. By not having a key, always having to ring when I came and went, even by my well-intentioned efforts to make my own bed in the morning, it was better just to let Irenka or Esperanza do it," Mrs. Barber explained, as they were used to doing it and did a better job with the corners. I broke off a finial on an antique coat stand by throwing open a door, twice managed to set off the burglar alarm by mistake, and even blundered into Mr. and Mrs. Barber's room one night when I was looking for the bathroom. Luckily, Andy's parents were around so little that my presence didn't seem to inconvenience them very much. Unless Mrs. Barber was entertaining, she was out of the apartment from about 11 a.m., popping in for a couple of hours before dinner for a gin and lime and what she called a bit of a tub, and then not home again until we were in bed. Of Mr. Barber I saw even less, except on weekends and when he was sitting around after work with his napkin-wrapped glass of club soda, waiting for Mrs. Barber to dress for their evening out. By far the biggest issue I faced was Andy's siblings. Though Platt, luckily, was off terrorizing younger children at Groughton, still Kitsy and the youngest brother, Toddy, who was only 7, clearly resented having me around to usurp what minor attention they got from their parents. There were a lot of tantrums and pouting, a lot of eye-rolling and hostile giggling on Kitsy's part, as well as a baffling, to me, upset, never fully resolved, where she complained to her friends and the housekeepers and anyone who would listen that I'd been going in her room and messing around with the piggy bank collection on the shelf above her desk. As for Toddy, he grew more and more disturbed as the weeks went by, and still I was there. At breakfast, he gaped at me unashamed and frequently asked questions that made his mother reach under the table and pinch him. Where did I live? How much longer was I going to stay with them? Did I have a dad? Then where was he? Good question, I said, provoking horrified laughter from Kitsy, who was popular at school and, at 9, as pretty in her white blonde way as Andy was plain. Well, Juliet Ann, goddammit, I like all of these. This one is great too. This is a much better experience than where I don't really love any of them. This is really lively, bouncy, whimsical writing. There's a comedic cadence to it that I really like. So, why is she staying with the Barber family? She keeps referring to Andy. Is he a classmate? Everybody else is like Andy's parents, Andy's siblings, so we don't see Andy in this passage. And she says, good question, in response to Toddy asking her about her dad. Does she have a dad, and where was he? So there's something going on there. Groton is a college in New England, I believe, but I may have that wrong. I remember Groton from my favorite movie, 6 Degrees of Separation, so I really like it. Yeah, I want to know, I want to read it, I want to read more. I think the writing is fantastic. A bit of a tub. Yeah, okay. This is a tough call for me because these were all great, but I'm going to say that my first choice is going to be book 2 about the lovely impish Parlanchina, because I love her and I want to find out more about her. A close second would be book number 1 about the asshole Reg who keeps calling at Colette and Aldous' house half-court. And a close third is the third book with this young, sounds like a girl, maybe high school age, I'm not sure, staying at the barber's house. But I am really interested in all 3 of them. What a fantastic batch, Juliet Ann. Thank you. So let's find out what these are. Oh my God, I need another glass of wine before I... Okay, what an interesting selection. Only book number 3 have I ever heard of. I've heard of the author of book number 2, but book number 1, my second choice, I haven't heard of the author or the title. So book number 1, which was my second choice, the one about the asshole Reg making the moves on Colette, although I am extrapolating a little bit from what's here in saying that, is a novel called I'll Go to Bed at Noon by Gerard Woodward. What the hell? So Juliet's given some very personal descriptions of the book. She said this is one of the novels that got her back into reading fiction in her 20s after a long break where she had been only reading nonfiction, and this was the novel that got her back into fiction. She says she's probably changed a lot as a person and a reader since then, but wow, okay, fascinating. So my first choice was book number 2, and this is now I didn't check, I think I can pronounce his name, Louis de Bernier's novel, The War of Don Emanuel's Nether Parts. What a fabulous title. And no, I have never read anything by him. She says it's part of a trilogy, and she likes this book better than Captain Corelli's Mandolin, which is the only book of his that I've heard of. Didn't it win something? Booker or something years ago. And it's got some magical realism, which sometimes I like, but I love this passage. So I will be reading that book sooner rather than later. And book number 3 is on my TBR. The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt. I believe Secret History is her first one, but I'm not sure I have that correct, but I want to read both of them. This is the first excerpt of her fiction that I've ever read, so wow. Juliet says she preferred Secret History more than this one, The Goldfinch, and I've heard a few people say that, but this sounds totally appealing. So, Juliet Ann, what an amazing selection. Thank you so much. I want to dig around a little bit about the first 2. Everybody knows about Donna Tartt, but I've never heard of Gerard Woodward, so I want to look that up and tell you about him, and then a little bit about de Bernier's too, because I'm not so familiar with him. Oh, interesting. Gerard Woodward is not a lot older than me. He was born in 1961, and so he's still alive, and he's a British novelist, poet, and short story writer. And this novel, I'll Go to Bed at Noon, was shortlisted for the 2004 Man Booker Prize. So some of you must have read this, so please weigh in, but I'm really drawn to that one. And it looks like he's written about a half dozen novels. The most recent novel was Vanishing in 2014, and he's written some short stories. The most recent was 2016. Definitely want to investigate Gerard Woodward. So wonderful. Okay, I didn't ever really understand, because I knew so little about Bernier's, that he's actually British. He was born Louis de Bernier Smart, and the first part of his surname comes from his French Huguenot ancestors. And he was born in 1954, and according to Wikipedia, The War of Don Emanuel's Netherparts was his novelistic debut. He wrote a book of short stories before that. But this novel was 1990, and I want to read it, so okay. Well, I'm totally stoked. I want to stay up all night reading all three of these novels. So, how about you? Which of these would be your first pick? And tell me if you've read any of these authors. I'm particularly curious about Gerard Woodward. It's completely new to me. Alright, so that is the totally blind version of the page 112 tag. If you're a booktuber and you're interested in doing an exchange, a collaboration on this tag, please leave a comment below. If you're a subscriber and would like to send me 3 pages so that I can do a totally blind version with the samples that you send me, please also leave a comment below. I've got maybe 2 in the pipeline, so there's no big rush, but thanks for watching.